Hey folks, welcome back to 3 Zen. Okay, so now I'm going to cover Dad's PCS move from Kadena, Okinawa, to Davis-Monthan in Tucson, and tell you a few stories about that particular move. In spring, summer of 1955, Dad received orders to DM. And once again, we drove down to Naha, hopped on an Army transport ship, and came back across the ocean. Again, I don't remember if we stopped at Hawaii or not. And I know for damn sure I didn't shoot any olive seeds. But anyway, got to San Francisco and picked up his Buick. I think it was a 1953 Buick. And then drove north to Lebanon, Oregon, where my mom's folks lived, along with a couple of her brothers and sisters. And once again, I became reacquainted with my cousins there and fell in love with them all. Just loved being around those folks. Stayed there for maybe 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days. I don't know how long we stayed. And then it was off across the country to White House, Ohio. I do remember stopping at a gas station in Idaho. And I was helping Dad. I don't know what I was doing, but I know I was out of the car. And I saw the gas station attendant come up. And as he was filling the car up, he looked at Dad and he says, he saw the license tags and he said, "Okinawa, huh?" And Dad said, "Yes, sir." And this guy says, "Drive all the way?" And Dad said, "Yes, sir." And I just kind of looked at him and said, "Okay, fine." We got back in the car and laughed about that for a couple miles, and then continued our journey on to White House. Now, I can't tell you how long of a journey that would have been. It would have been from Lebanon, Oregon to near Toledo. I'm thinking maybe 5 days. In a 1953 Buick, with no air conditioner, probably during the summer. And there's mom and dad and 3 of us kids who had a perpetual fight over who was going to sit in the middle or who had to sit in the middle. And we tried pulling rank by age, by sex, whatever. It was just one continued fight. But anyway, so we get to White House, and I learned that my grandfather was a lot sicker than what I'd led or any of us had been led to believe. But I didn't realize how sick he was. I just remember that I enjoyed seeing my grandparents. And being a brat, that was a treat to see them because we didn't see them very often. So after maybe a week or so, week and a half, I don't know what it was, again, we took off then down to Tucson, Arizona to Davis-Monthan. And once again, probably 5, 6 days there. So when you add it up, we spent a couple days going from San Francisco to Lebanon, Oregon, a couple days then to White House, or maybe 5 days to White House, Ohio, and another 5 down to DM. So I'm thinking that probably ate up the better part of maybe 28, 30 days by the time you take in to account the visiting. I saw on someone else's post about vacations in the military. Well, we call those PCS moves. But anyway, so be it. We get to Tucson, and at first we lived off base before Dad could get on base housing. And I attended 4th and 5th grades at Tucson. And I have some very fond memories of living there in the desert. I just love playing out in the desert. Again, like I said, I developed an interest in being a free-range kid in Okinawa, and I grew on that, if you will, in Tucson. One of the things that I loved doing was hunting lizards. That was prime lizard hunting country in those days. And my thought was, if I could catch enough of those lizards over the period of the summer, I could probably make a nice lizard skin coat for my mom for Christmas. So that was my objective. And I was kind of well on my way to making a jacket, or at least a vest, or maybe some leather gloves, lizard skin gloves, I don't know. When one day we saw this huge sheet of cardboard laying out in the desert. Turns out, I think it was like a mattress box. So there were four of us, all around the age of 9, 10, and we stationed ourselves at each edge of the box. And then when somebody gave the signal, we pulled the box aside and everybody rushed into the center. Great plan. But we didn't take into account the Gila monster that was laying under the box. Holy crap. I saw this thing, and of course I'm already getting some speed up as I'm racing in to catch lizards. And I managed to jump over the thing, and thank goodness it was in the heat of the day and that Gila monster wasn't moving too fast. So that brought an end to my lizard hunting, other than the occasional one that walked by our property. And I knew exactly what the threat was. I could see it. And hated to tell Mom, but she wasn't going to get a coat that year for Christmas. So the next thing we engaged in was prairie dog hunting. Used to see tons of them out there in the desert, and I thought, wouldn't it be neat to catch one of them? Okay, how do you catch a prairie dog? I wouldn't have a clue. We didn't have Google in those days, so I didn't have any idea. So what I came up with was, what if we put a garbage can in our wagons and filled it full of water, hauled it out to the desert, poured the water down the prairie dog hole, stood near another hole 1 or 2 away or nearby, and we could catch the prairie dog when it came up to run away. Sound like a good plan. So again, 3 or 4 of us went to our respective homes, got our wagons, filled up trash cans full of water, and hauled them out into the desert. Now, I don't know if you've ever done that before, but it's a chore to lug those wagons through the sand to a prairie dog mound. Anyway, we get out there, and I can't tell you how many cans, garbage cans full of water I poured down those prairie dog holes and never saw one, nary a one, that I could catch. Then one day I happened to look over, probably about 30 feet away. There was another mound, and there was these 3 prairie dogs standing there looking at us. And I swear I could almost hear one of them say to the other 2, look at those dumbasses pouring water down the prairie dog hole. They're not going to catch anything. So we gave that up. But that gives us some kind of insight into what our summer activity playtime was like. Around September, we started back to school, and Mom and Dad got a call. Actually, it was around November. Got a call from Ohio, and my grandfather was very ill. And so they packed up, took my sister, and took the train up to Ohio. My brother and I couldn't go because of school and I'm sure the expense. But from the time we'd gotten to Tucson to the time they left, I had discovered Oral Roberts on TV on Sunday mornings. And, I was only 9 years old. And I would tune in religiously, no pun intended. And I'd sit there and watch these people bring their loved ones to Oral Roberts, and he would heal them. And I remember asking my mom, I said, Mom, why don't you and Dad go up and get Grandpa and take him to Oral Roberts so he can be healed? And I don't know, they just kind of put me off or whatever. But every Sunday I'd sit and watch that, and I'd have tears in my eyes, just thinking about maybe he could help Grandpa. And my words fell on deaf ears, so it seemed. But when they went up there and then came home after my grandfather subsequently passed away, I was so mad at them. It took a long while for me to really come over that. Why didn't you help Grandpa? And I felt so bloody helpless myself, I couldn't help him. But eventually I got over it and moved on. And we soon got base housing. So we moved from downtown Tucson to on base. We lived on Cass Avenue. Now, where we lived on Cass Avenue was at the corner, and I don't know what the crossing street was, but that street that went out from the corner where we lived just kind of went out a little bit into the desert and stopped. But at the end of that stop was a magic playground. It was the Boneyard, where they stored obsolete airplanes. And in 55, 56, 57, they didn't have a fence there. So we would go out into the Boneyard as kids and crawl all over those airplanes. Josh had a ball. Not all over the airplanes, but also inside of them. And we sit in those seats up there, the pilot seats and whatnot. And I got my first 9 MiG kills there in that Boneyard. Just looking out the window, holding onto a yoke or a stick. And my imagination just went wild with it all. About that time, I had been invited down to a local TV station, which was kind of unique in those days, to the Ranger Mac TV show. I can't explain what it was much beyond they had Ranger Mac and he came on and had a bunch of kids there and whatnot. So dear old Dad knew I was going to be on Ranger Mac at 4:30, 5 o'clock, whatever it was. So he got a lot of his buddies to come over to the Officers Club to watch his kid on Ranger Mac. And I really made him proud. As Ranger Mac was going around asking various kids what they wanted to do when they grew up, I proudly looked at him and I said, I want to be a Navy pilot. Well, I thought perhaps taking off and landing on carriers would be kind of neat at that time. Little did I know the amount of crap Dad took from all his buddies at the Officers Club that afternoon. But anyway, that kind of went by. I did have an intense interest in flying, really developing about that time. At DM, they had B-47s and KC-97s, the refuelers. But I remember watching those B-47s, and they were so slick. And they were noisy, put out a lot of black smoke. That was just cool for a kid like myself. Also continued to enjoy camping out. I just love sleeping out. I love sleeping out under the stars. And I learned quite a bit about living outside, camping outside, and so forth. One night we were camping out, actually just right across the street. A couple of kids set up some tents, and we built a little campfire there. And thought, you know what, a can of beans sounds like it tastes pretty good. So I reached in my knapsack, pulled out a can of beans, and tossed them in the fire. I didn't know you were supposed to open the damn things, but they got pretty hot, and eventually, a can of beans, if you don't open it, will explode. And you haven't lived till you've been peppered with hot Campbell's pork and beans. It will make an impression upon you at 10 years old that'll stay with you the rest of your life. Well, as if being burned by the beans wasn't bad enough, pulling that little piece of shrapnel out of my leg added to it all. And for the next 2 weeks, I made sure I wore jeans so I wouldn't have to explain that gash in the side of my leg. So anyway, that was just another little adventure we had. Another lesson I learned at DM during that time was around Easter 1957. My dad was across the street talking to this lady, and he's just over there visiting with her, and I was playing around, goofing around with this paper plate. Well, he kind of got nervous with me throwing it like a frisbee, so he told me to stop. And I did, and I walked over to where they were, and pretty soon I dropped the paper plate and picked it up, and then kind of flicked it a little bit, went over and picked it up, and pretty soon, wouldn't you know it, I'm back there playing frisbee with the paper plate again. Well, a gust of wind caught it, took it around, and it hit this lady in the stomach. I didn't know she was pregnant at the time. I didn't pay any attention to it. But anyway, she was. And my dad came over and cuffed me with a backhand that, as I tell you this story, I can almost see the stars still today. I mean, it was well as it knocked me. It got my attention. So I went home, and the reason why I know it was Easter is because before I could open or go on any Easter egg hunt of any kind, I had to get dressed up in a coat and tie, go back across the street to her door, knock on the door Easter morning, and apologize for throwing that paper plate. And I did, and I learned not to ever throw a paper plate again in that case. The fascinating thing about living in that house on Davis-Monthan was, about 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I had an occasion to fly out to Tucson, and I stayed at Davis-Monthan in the BOQ. I did that deliberately, and one afternoon, I took a walk into the housing area and found Cass Avenue, walked down, and where our house was no longer. It was just a field of stone. There was a fence around it because they were building new houses. But I just sat there on that chain link fence, just kind of holding up, looking at where my house had been. And it evoked a feeling of emptiness. Like, wow, this was just, I don't know how to express it. I know what I'm feeling, but I don't know how to express it. It was just a sense of emptiness. Looked around, and I saw the road that went out into the Boneyard. It was still there. And looked a little bit further around and saw the house where I went to the back door to apologize to the lady. But then I turned around and looked at my house, and it was gone. It was like, was I ever there? Well, of course I was. But that feeling of emptiness, it's haunting. And I'll tell you a little bit more as these stories evolve. I've had similar occasions at other installations. Now, if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to take a second to make sure I covered all my DM notes with what I wanted to tell you. All right, got that. Pretty well covered it all. So, to tie this chapter up, in spring of 1957, I began badgering mom and dad for a dog. I wanted a puppy dog in the worst way. I mean, I had mentioned it a couple times, and I was 57, I was 10, I was going on 11, and Mom kind of helped me with Dad, and he acquiesced, and so we went and got this puppy. And I love that dog. I just love that dog more than anything. And 3 weeks later, Dad got orders to Puerto Rico. You gotta be kidding me. And he came home and told us that we would be unable to take that dog to Puerto Rico because of one reason after another. And I had to give it up. So I owned that puppy for 3 weeks. And then we were off to Ramey, Puerto Rico. But all in all, I love living at Davis-Monthan. I love the B-47s. I love the lizard hunting, the prairie dog hunts. I love the trips out to old Tucson. Got to visit Tombstone. With my imagination, I just got lost in a couple of gunfights in old Tucson, every bit as much as the dog fights in the Boneyard. But what a magic place, again, for a kid to grow up. And so the next time I check in, we'll pick it up here, head back to White House, and then down to Puerto Rico. So nice seeing everybody, and thanks for stopping by.